This is Open Mic Night of the Living Dead, and I had a premonition that this episode was going to be the best yet. That's right, this week we're taking a deep dive into 2000's Final Destination.
The creature's creeping right behind you. I hope you finally find a little slice of peace and light. 'Cause it comes crashing down tonight. Welcome to the open mic. When we call your name, you'll die. But there's no need to dread. This is the open mic night of the living dead.
All right,
Okay, here we are.
this is our first movie deep dive in quite a few weeks.
It's been a while. I kind of forgot what it was like to do this deep dive.
Well, here we are, we're going to do it, and like I said, it's better than ever.
I think you're right. I think it is better than ever. We are in the second half of our first year at this point. So we have picked up momentum. We've learned some things. And we really like this movie. I'm Rachel.
I'm John, and, we're married. I don't like to admit that in most places, but
Ha ha ha. So funny.
here on the internet, I guess I shall.
If not here, then where?
And we love horror movies and we love music. So at the end of this episode, we're going to debut 2 new original songs for each other and for you, inspired by Final Destination.
So inspiring.
But before we get to that, let's talk about this movie for a while.
Let's do it. I was so excited to spin this movie.
Yes, as was I. It is definitely a standout in my movie memory, horror movie memory, I should say. This movie was released on March 17th of the year 2000.
One moment, John. We should mention there's going to be significant numbers of spoilers.
Oh, sure.
Right. Which I feel like maybe we assume people assume, but just to be safe.
Right. Thank you for mentioning that. Well, now they know when it came out.
Oh, no.
What are they going to do?
They'll know which one to watch because in the franchise, some of them are similarly named. So this is the 2000 Final Destination.
So in the year 2000, when this movie came out, I guess I was still 16 years old, to be turning 17 soon after this release. Do you remember where you were, or what, I guess more importantly, your first experience with this movie?
I do not. I was in college. So this was back on the timeline when the age difference between us meant a lot. In the year 2000, I was a freshman in college in New York City. I only remember watching one movie that year because it was American Beauty, and it was the first movie I ever saw in New York City. I don't remember the first time I saw this movie, but I watched it multiple times in my 20s, movie nights in college. It was a big hit. I just don't remember that first watch.
I truly do not remember either, but I like to imagine that I saw this in the theater when it came out. I think there's a high probability that I did because it was around that time I was getting to the theater a lot, and specifically to see all the new horror movies. As we've discussed before, Scream sort of sparked that interest, and I was catching a lot of the new horror movies that came after that. So I think I probably saw this in the theater, but I can't tell you I have a strong memory of it. But I do have a strong memory of this movie, which I watched plenty of times. I feel like I had a copy of it on VHS, though that has not turned up in my searches as I've gone through storage at my parents' house. But I did love this movie from the jump, and the subsequent sequels, some of which I really hadn't seen until this past year when we watched all of these movies, but definitely the first 2 or 3 I watched quite a bit over the course of the years.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing the second one in the theater, and I was in college, but I was in Massachusetts by then. But I remember seeing, because number 2 has that iconic opening scene. This one also does, which we'll get into. But anyway, memorable scenes for sure.
So Final Destination was directed by James Wong, and the original screenplay came from a story by Jeffrey Reddick, and the screenplay was then touched up by Glenn Morgan and James Wong, who were longtime partners in writing and other, production, direction, those sorts of things. This movie was a commercial success upon its release, with a box office of $112.9 million against its $23 million budget. So people were coming out to see this one.
Yeah, successful, I'd say.
And it opened at number 3 at the box office behind Aaron Brockovich and Mission to Mars, and remained at number 3 for its second weekend. And it eventually fell from the top 10 in its 8th weekend. So it really made a strong showing.
Wow. And that's, back in the day before the internet, man, where the only way you'd hear about a movie is, magazines or I guess like entertainment, MTV. I don't really know how you would, but your friends would go and be like, this movie was awesome, you should go.
Yeah, and trailers on TV and stuff. I think this was particularly attractive in its premise. But despite my enjoyment of the movie and despite its success, I was surprised to learn about its mixed reception, particularly among critics.
Yeah, also surprised, particularly by the critic score.
Yeah, on Rotten Tomatoes, it's 50%, right? Or thereabouts?
Yeah, 50% exactly, with a 68% from the fans. I guess it surprises me a little.
Like a 7 out of 10.
I guess.
But
found it surprising anyway.
And even on Metacritic, it was a 39 out of 100, which is a generally unfavorable review. On June 14th, 2010, though, Nick Hyman of Metacritic included Final Destination in the website's editorial, 15 Movies the Critics Got Wrong. So they have recognized their mistake to some degree, but there were a lot of negative reviews, and I've got a few here if you would like to hear them.
I would love to hear them because I didn't go down that rabbit hole.
Stephen Holden of the New York Times said, even by the crude standards of teenage horror, Final Destination is dramatically flat. Kevin Maynard of Mr. Showbiz called it crude and witless. Rita Kempley of The Washington Post said, your own Final Destination just might be the box office to demand your money back. Jay Carr of the Boston Globe, more local to us, wrote that it starts by cheating death and ends by cheating us. I'm wondering if they saw the original ending.
Did they see the original ending? Or, you know what it's reminding me of, though, is the very different reactions that everyone on the plane who survives has towards Alex. Like, some of them hate it and some of them are interested. We'll talk about that later, obviously. But I think, and maybe for the same reason, death is scary. And maybe I think maybe this movie deals with death in the most explicit way possible. And I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of, is that people just weren't ready for the deep philosophical answers this movie purports to give.
And just a couple more. I'm not going to go through all of them, but Ernest Hardy of LA Weekly said that the movie fails because it takes itself both too seriously and not seriously enough. And Barbara Schulgasser of the Chicago Tribune said that it met the low standards of a mediocre TV movie, which I don't know. How
do you watch?
What TV movie she was watching in the 90s. It was not the golden age of television that we've experienced. So
at all. Just the special effects scenes alone. Holy smokes. I don't get it. But again, movies are subjective, I guess. That's wild. It's
funny when I go through these negative reviews, it often reminds me of the first review I ever received as a solo musician performer.
Oh, yeah?
I was starting a lineup of shows at colleges throughout the Northeast. I can't remember which college it was. I'd have to go back in my records. But I was performing at this coffee house at a college in January, very cold, but it was during an orientation for new students who were starting their college during the second semester at this school. I guess that was allowed or however it works. But there were several different events going on at the same time. It was at night. It was a freezing cold night. And these groups of students were basically going from venue to venue. And really the only consistent person that was at the show was this critic. And I could just see her sitting there looking so unhappy at my performance. And I think the title of the review was something like, John offers no warm numbers on a cold night.
Oh, ouch.
And it really wasn't that bad. But it seemed like she was... From the review, it didn't seem like she was looking for anything positive. And it didn't note the fact that students were, sort of on a program and going from location to location, and that was sort of unusual setup for a performance like this, where I was, scheduled to play for 75 minutes, regardless of whether there were 2 people in the room or 200. There were never 200. But anyway, classic.
How do you become a critic? I mean, and I suppose we do critiques, right, as we do these deep dives, but I just don't. It's such a subjective thing. Maybe that lady hates the cold, and maybe you reminded her of an ex-boyfriend, right? Like, there's so many little pieces, bits and pieces, because music and art and film are things we respond to emotionally. And since emotions are not logical or objective, why do people listen to critics? Sorry, is this something everyone else has already thought about and I'm just getting there? I just don't. Like, it's interesting. I like reading people's reviews and I want to understand why people feel the way they feel about it, but they're just so certain with their words.
Well, along with the negative reviews came some positive reviews, including Roger Ebert at the Chicago Sun-Times. He enjoyed the film, gave it 3 out of 4 stars, saying that Final Destination will no doubt be a hit and inspire obligatory sequels. He was not wrong. Like the original Scream, this movie is too good to be the end of the road. I have visions of my own.
That sounds odd for what we've heard him say about some of our favorite movies.
Yeah, I think it was around this time that there was things were taking a bit of a turn in terms of accepting horror movies as legitimate entertainment.
Interesting.
But he did note that the similarities between the plane crash in this movie and the real-life crash of TWA Flight 800 that happened in 1996 was in bad taste. Mick LaSalle of the San Francisco Chronicle gave it props, writing that it was playful and energized enough to keep an audience guessing. And Kevin Thomas of the LA Times said it was a terrific theatrical feature debut for television veterans Glenn Morgan and James Wong, among several other positive reviews. But despite the film's mixed reception, Sawa was praised by critics for his performance. Devon Sawa, the star of the film, playing Alex. And it still won the Saturn Awards for Best Horror Film and Best Performance by a Young Actor for Sawa. And Ali Larter, who plays Clear, won the Young Hollywood Award for Breakthrough Performance by a Female. The cinematographer Robert McLaughlin was nominated for Best Cinematography in a Theatrical Feature at the Canadian Society of Cinematographers Awards in 2001. Both the concept, plane explosion, and several deaths have made various lists of best deaths and scariest movie moments. For good reason.
That all makes sense, I guess. Except the people who think it's dumb. They don't make sense to me, but that's okay. I probably don't make sense to them. That's really cool. I was also surprised, and I did not read a lot of the specific reviews, but just from the ratings, I kind of thought this was more cherished, I guess, as a movie, especially with all the excitement with every sequel there's been. But we watched all 6 of these now last year, right? So we recently have looked at this as a whole franchise, which I also think gives, looking back at the first movie in the franchise, in light of having recently seen all the rest of them, I think also was a new perspective watching it this time around.
Yeah, I go up and down in how much I enjoy it, depending, I guess, on the circumstances. But when we actually watched it last night, so it would be fresh in our heads, even though we watched it
Twice
at least.
You watched it 3 times this year?
Over the last year, yeah.
Yeah, because you took the kid to the theater to see it, right? So you got to see it in the theater this year.
Yeah.
That must have been kind of cool. We can talk about that a little bit later too, I guess. That was really neat in October. There was a bunch of old classic movies that got out. I think that's the only one we made it to, or you made it to anyway. That was really fun. I like this more, I think, every time I see it. I think I liked it maybe a little more the last time I saw it was the first time I'd seen it in years, and I was really pleasantly surprised by how solid it was and how well it held up. And so this time I think I was a little less impressed by it, only because I've seen it recently, and then I've seen all the other ones in between as well. But I have lots of nice things to say. I like this movie a lot.
You were also sleepy when we watched this last night.
Yes, I was, but not that sleepy. I've been sleepier. I've been way sleepier.
Lastly, if you were going to go to the movies in 2000 to see a horror film, there might be a couple of other good ones you could have picked up along the way, particularly American Psycho. And Cherry Falls, which I've not seen yet, but definitely has piqued my interest when it pops up. I think it has, Brittany Murphy was in that movie. Ginger Snaps,
Yay!
which we enjoy. Of course, Hellraiser Inferno. I don't remember which number in the franchise that one is, but I think it is among the diminishing films. But it was directed by Scott Derrickson of Black Phone and Sinister fame.
Oh, interesting. That's right. I remember that from our lists. Oh, cool.
Speaking of notable directors, Paul Verhoeven released Hollow Man in 2000.
Oh, yeah.
Which I actually watched quite a bit back then. Kevin Bacon, right?
Mm-hmm. Sort
of a take on Invisible Man. Tale. Pitch Black with Vin Diesel. I've heard that that's pretty good. I've not seen it.
I loved that movie. I've seen it, I think, a few times. That was a big hit for me. I liked Pitch Black quite a bit.
A movie I've not seen nor heard of, but sounds amazing. Psycho Beach Party.
What?
Sounds like a 1983 movie. And then, dipping into the parody realm of horror, 2000 saw the release of Scary Movie.
Oh, yeah.
And Wes Craven dropped Scream 3.
Oh, wow.
So, I'm sure I've missed some good ones in there, but that gives you a good idea of, What Lies Beneath was also another movie from 2000 that I watched several times back then that I enjoyed. More of a thriller, but definitely has some scary aspects. That's the one with Harrison Ford, Michelle Pfeiffer. Classic.
Yeah. No, that was a good one.
But that all being said, should we head into story time?
Sure. I'm curious, though, what your personal ranking is. You didn't say.
Oh, so I waver between a 7 and a 7.5 on my scale out of 10. And in terms of our podcast rating, 1 being total trash, 2 being generally good to great horror movies, and 3 being exceptional or genre changing or, what's another good word for third tier?
I don't know. Both exceptional and genre changing are accurate.
It would have to be 2+ at least.
Yeah, high 2.
High 2.
I gave it a 4 out of 5, so slightly higher than you. I think and I'll get into some of the things I really, really like, but this one just sits really well for me and is an important one that I think asks a lot of the questions I'm interested in asking.
Well, and of course, my scale has some more objectivity.
Objection.
More objectivity.
True.
Built into a certain extent as best as one can do.
Yeah, I'm less interested in objectivity, although it plays a role. It plays a smaller role in my scale. I have more of my feelings and personal opinions in my ratings, because that's ratings and rankings, actually. I lean put more weight on the personal preference side of things, and I'm okay with that. That's why I don't care if you rate one of my movies lower than me, because that's not for you, it's for me.
Yes, and I would say that this movie sits higher in my esteem than my rating might initially indicate.
That's fair. Okay, now we can tell a story.
All right, let's head into story time. the story of some kids and an airplane. They're going to Paris. Or maybe not. Is that good?
The cat looks like she's trying to escape the room.
Through the floor.
Which has no... She's trying to get under your dresser, which has about 1.5 inches of clearance underneath. She's not that small. And I'm not saying that has anything to do with the song you just sang. I'm just pointing that out, that's happening concurrently. Yeah, it was great, babe. I also could do it. I was actually taken aback. I was looking at various summaries, and Letterboxd got it totally wrong. Kind of. I'm not sure. Maybe they didn't watch the whole movie. But it says, after a teenager has a terrifying vision of him and his friends dying in a plane crash, he prevents the accident, only to have death hunt them down one by one. He doesn't prevent the accident. That's the whole point. But I guess whoever wrote that, anyway.
He prevents the deaths of some of the people.
Yes. So I think in IMDb they say, after getting a premonition about a plane crash on his school trip, Alex, a student, saves a few of his classmates, which is more accurate. However, their situation gets complicated when death starts chasing them. So that is bare bones the story that we're talking about. I think the story for this movie is one of the best parts, and I think it's got one of the best origin stories. That's really interesting, and I know that you spent some time looking at the production team and the filmmakers.
Yes, and oftentimes we start with the director, and I'll give some background on that, and I will do a little bit of that for this movie, but because of the interesting nature and the uniqueness of the story, I focused a little bit more on the story creator and screenwriter Jeffrey Reddick to start. And Jeffrey Reddick is an American screenwriter and film director born in Jackson, Kentucky back in 1969. And when he was 15 years old, he saw the first Nightmare on Elm Street and thought it was one of the best horror movies he'd ever seen. As a result, he wrote to Robert Shea, who was the chairman of New Line, and he wrote him a letter and sent along with the letter a treatment that he'd written for a prequel to A Nightmare on Elm Street. And the studio, or Robert Shea, sent back the treatment with a form letter saying, we don't take unsolicited material. Everything has to come through an agent. But this 15-year-old was not taking no for an answer. And Reddick wrote Shea a kind of nasty letter almost, saying he'd seen at least 5 New Line movies, spending like $25 on their movies. So the least Shea could do was take 10 minutes to read his stuff. So this convinced Shea to read it, who responded with an encouraging letter telling Reddick to keep at his screenwriting efforts. And Reddick started kind of stalking the New Line office, and that's Reddick's words, and writing Shea's assistant Joy. And New Line started sending Reddick Nightmare on Elm Street memorabilia and other stuff when new movies would come out. And in turn, Reddick would write stories and send them back to New Line. This relationship lasted through high school for Reddick until Reddick was a sophomore in college. And that summer, he went to New York City for a summer field study, and Shea's assistant Joy told Reddick to come into the New Line office to see if they had an internship for him, which they did. And he started that internship in marketing and subsequently worked for New Line for the next 11 years.
That's such an insane story. And it's funny because in this movie, we see a lot of teenage lack of restraint with some of our characters, right? Like the passion just over, which we know is very normal for teenagers. And it's interesting that his career started with kind of a letter that an older person might not have written back, right? But that's what got his foot in the door.
Well, and it is really kind of inspiring. You know, you hear these stories or you hear people say, you know, if you've got a dream, you got to chase it, you got to do whatever it takes. And I think a lot of people would have maybe written the initial letter and the treatment and taken the no as the final answer. And he just took one extra step that led to this, you know, basically led to this movie being created.
Yeah, you got to take those opportunities or make them if you don't see them. Don't give up too easily, right?
So Reddick has several writer, director, and producer credits throughout his career. The majority are producer credits. But his first credit really begins with Final Destination, goes to the present day. He wrote the story for Final Destination 2. He wrote Tamara, Tamara, horror film that I think I saw back in the day, and Day of the Dead from 2008. So the remake, I believe, of the Romero movie from 85.
Yes, that was. I had to, of course, look up which of the Dead movie we were talking about. So yes, it was adapted from Romero's original. So it's the remake of that.
We got to do flashcards for you for those movies.
I really think I need some sort of online course to figure out the difference. Like I could teach a class on like the Halloween timeline pretty well. I feel pretty confident about that. But the Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, Return of the Living Night, I think
it's more linear, really, than the Halloween. I think you just get tripped up on the opening word.
The opening word, yeah. I'm not sure why. It's like it slides off the front of my mind like butter, and I can't grab onto it. Does that make sense to any? Yes.
Well, I think you got to go. The first one's night. You know that for sure.
I know that.
So the second one's dawn because that comes after night.
Okay, that makes sense.
And you just have to know that the second one ever made, was the mall.
Second one was the mall. Okay. Because dawn has nothing to do with the mall. And I guess that's also the problem. It's like in my head, I remember where they happen and their locations, but have not yet managed to find a rubric.
I think that you have to think of the titles as indicating where in the series they are. So as opposed to Night of the Living Dead 2.
Oh, wait. So that means Day of the Dead is the third one?
Day of the Dead is the third one.
After dawn. You know, this would have helped out a long time ago if you had pointed out this really obvious thing to me for whatever reason. This has never clicked for me before.
Well, we'll keep working on it.
So Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Afternoon of the Dead?
Absolutely. You know it. That's the famous one. It takes place at a Tim Hortons.
Oh, no.
Reddick also wrote and directed a 2020 film called Don't Look Back. I don't know much about it. Did you look at that at all?
Which one was it? It was
2020's Don't Look Back.
No, I wrote it down, but I didn't look into it at all.
So we'll have to check that out, see what's up with that. I haven't heard much about it, so doesn't bode particularly well, but who knows? Might be pretty awesome. But this film, Final Destination, started as a spec script written by Jeffrey Reddick for an episode of The X-Files, and he did it to get a TV agent because basically he was told in order to get an agent, he needed to write a spec script for a TV show. So he wrote an episode of The X-Files with sort of the same premise as Final Destination. Again, he was working at New Line Cinema at this time. A colleague there convinced him to write it as a feature-length film. Now, where did the idea come from? This is also interesting. Reddick stated that the idea was based on a true story he read. Sounds like a Reader's Digest type of thing. He said that, and this is his quote, "I was actually flying home to Kentucky and I read a story about a woman who was on vacation and her mom called her and said, 'Don't take the flight tomorrow. I have a really bad feeling about it.' She switched flights and the plane that she would have been on crashed. And so Reddick wondered what if she was supposed to die on that flight and what would the consequences of not dying on that flight be? New Line Cinema bought Reddick's treatment and hired him to write the original draft of the script, which featured death as an unseen force. However, in Reddick's version, the original version, the survivors were originally adults, but New Line made Reddick change them to teens after the success of Scream and its subsequent followers, I guess you'd call it. And New Line then submitted the finished script to directors, including writing partners James Wong and Glenn Morgan. Now, Wong and Morgan, who were writing partners for The X-Files, became interested in the script and agreed to work on the film, and they rewrote the script to comply with their standards, which we'll get into in a bit. They have quite a bit of experience at this point. They both really like the idea of the world at large created in Reddick's story, in the service of death being the antagonist, and that you never see a slasher-type killer. It was less about whether or not the characters are going to die, but how they will die and whether they can avoid their deaths. This premises the film on the inevitability of death, which I'm sure you'll get into in a bit.
Maybe just a little.
Now, I was interested because you hear about this a lot, that there was an original story, screenplay, then it gets hit up by a team of writers, and movies now particularly, I feel like, have sometimes you'll see a list of a bunch of writers, or that there are uncredited ghostwriters and those sorts of things as well, script doctors, those sorts of things. So I was curious as to what revisions I might be able to find that Wong and Morgan contributed. And here's what I found. I trust it's fairly accurate, but they added depth to several characters, providing more backstory and nuanced relationships between them. They restructured the death scenes, focusing on creating more elaborate and suspenseful sequences that played into the theme of fate, sort of the Rube Goldberg of it all. They reworked the pacing of the script to maintain tension throughout the film, which I think they do a great job of.
Mm-hmm.
The rewritten script emphasized the philosophical exploration of fate, free will, and the idea that no one can escape death. They added more dark humor elements, balancing the horror with moments of levity that became a hallmark of the series. And this one is really tempered, I feel like, but the funny moments really give you a kick when they pop in. But it's not, I wouldn't call it a horror comedy by any means.
No.
And lastly, they integrated specific visual cues and stylistic choices to enhance the storytelling experience, like in the ways the death was foreshadowed. Funnily enough, Reddick has some regrets about not giving the franchise a physical antagonist, because he said that at Halloween there's no costume to buy and there's no action figures. Like, there's nothing you can do, like, merchandise-wise to represent death.
It's a great point.
But I bet you could put out some Alex and Clear figures.
Oh, 100%.
Get on that NECA.
Yeah. Yeah, what he said. Yeah, I did not do too much looking into these filmmakers just because I knew that you were going to be doing quite a bit of that. But I did find a couple of cool. There's been a lot of communication from the filmmakers about this film. So I watched some really cool videos and found some cool interviews. One thing James Wong said that I really liked: we want to do for planes and air travel what Jaws did for sharks and swimming. I think they succeeded at doing that for trucks with logs on them.
Yeah.
I don't think they
absolutely.
succeeded for planes and air travel.
Well, something else came shortly after that would do that naturally.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. So, but I thought that was an interesting quotation in light of, yeah.
Well, and speaking of James Wong, I haven't focused as much on Wong and Morgan as I did on Reddick, but James Wong is a Hong Kong American television and film director, screenwriter, and producer, with his career basically starting in the mid-'80s. He met his future writing partner, Glenn Morgan, in high school after he moved to California from Hong Kong at age 10. In college, he began as an engineering major, but switched to a film major after seeing Apocalypse Now in the theater.
Oh, cool.
And after graduating college, he was hired as an assistant to film and television producer Sandy Howard, and during this time, Wong and Morgan wrote screenplays. They wrote the 1985 film The Boys Next Door, and Morgan and Wong would work on many Stephen J. Cannell productions in the 80s. And I think you would recognize, like, you know how 80s and 90s shows had, like, the production sign-off things at the end?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Good dog, sit, woof, that sort of thing.
Yes.
I think you would recognize the Cannell one if you saw it. Check it out on YouTube. I bet you can look it up. But they were staff writers and story editors for 21 Jump Street, notably, among other shows. And then they began working with Chris Carter in 1993 on The X-Files. And Wong made his TV directing debut with the conspiracy-themed episode Musings of a Cigarette-Smoking Man, which was written by Morgan. His feature directorial debut was the film we're talking about today, Final Destination, followed in 2001 by the movie The One, starring Jet Li. Then he did some more horror films, including Final Destination 3. In 2006, Wong and Morgan wrote the Black Christmas remake, which was directed by Morgan.
Okay. That makes sense. I missed that in their filmography when I was looking, but that makes a lot of sense.
In 2009, Wong directed Dragon Ball Z, like the live-action movie, I guess. I don't know much about that, but when I used to be a tutor, I had a lot of students that were into that. And since 2011, Wong has been working with Ryan Murphy as an executive producer and writer on American Horror Story. And he did some writing and directing in later episodes of The X-Files, like in the teens of this century. And most recently, he was a director and writer on the show 911. And real quickly, there's a lot of crossover, obviously, between Wong and Morgan since they were partners for so long. But he's an American TV and film producer, writer, and director born in Syracuse, New York, before his family moved to California when he was 14. He did many projects with Wong and branched off to do his own stuff in the late aughts, early teens, going on to serve as executive producer on The X-Files Season 11 in 2017. He wrote and directed one episode of that season and directed a second episode shortly after. In 2019, he was an executive producer for the Twilight Zone reboot by Jordan Peele and his Monkey Paw Productions Umbrella. And for Final Destination, one of Morgan's contributions was John Denver's Rocky Mountain High as a harbinger of death. And the reason was when he was working on the show Millennium, which Wong and Morgan worked on this show Millennium. Do you know that show?
No, but it's ringing some sort of bell in my brain. So
the old brain bell.
The old brain bell. Oops, sorry. What is happening?
You're fired.
The
Quick.
sound was off. It was an ad on IMDb. I was just trying to look at the cast.
Ted, get on the microphone.
I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. That's so embarrassing. It was a trailer for Millennium, obviously, that autoplayed when I hit the thing. It was muted even.
If I remember correctly, I think Chris Carter was also a showrunner for Millennium, and he was then the showrunner for X-Files. And I think that's kind of how those are connected.
Yes, he was.
But when Glenn Morgan was working on Millennium, he was at the Vancouver airport and about to board a plane, and a John Denver song came over the PA. And it was just a few weeks after Denver had died in a plane crash, which Morgan found pretty creepy and ominous. And the song he heard, I don't think, was Rocky Mountain High, but that was the song, I should say, that they selected for the movie, which we can talk about a bit more in the future.
Right.
And I only have a little bit on filming, and then I'll let you get into the characters, which are really the bread and butter of this movie besides the unique story.
Yeah.
But principal photography took place on Long Island in New York City for the plane scene, and Vancouver Island for the additional scenes. So it was mostly shot in Canada. And I will tell you that after learning about this, I did notice, we knew that there were Canadian actors in it and that sort of thing. But one thing that really stood out is the opening credits of this movie sort of overlay different shots of things that are in Alex's bedroom, or at least presumably what's supposed to be Alex's bedroom, because the opening scene is him, packing up for his trip and discussing his trip with his parents. So the credits are looking at different things in his room and images of books from the shelves and everything. But one thing that stood out was a Toronto Raptors basketball lampshade.
Yes, you did notice that.
Which I thought was very strange for a bedroom of a teenager in New York who lives just outside of New York City in the year 2000. So maybe that was just a tribute to their shooting location. The death scene of Terry, who was played by Detmer, you'll get into that in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Getting hit by a bus was filmed first because it was easy, but much anticipated. All scenes were filmed using life casts of the actual actors. The death scenes, the Memorial, the Forest scene, and Paris were all filmed in Victoria, British Columbia. And additional scenes were later filmed in Toronto and San Francisco. And lastly, my only other note on filming is that for the airport, the Vancouver International Airport was used as a stand-in for JFK in the movie.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't see that part. Yeah, I thought it was, I remember you noticing that Canadian thing for sure.
That Canadian thing.
That Canadian thing.
Do you want to tell me about the characters?
Okay, yes, I will tell you about the cast and the characters here. One thing before we get into the individual characters is I'm not sure if you saw or noticed how many of the characters are named after famous horror film directors, actors, and producers.
I did notice that.
Yes. So Billy Hitchcock is named after...
Tom Savini.
Yes.
Alfred Hitchcock.
You are the worst.
Well, I didn't know I was going to get a quiz.
I know.
I had
Well,
to be cheeky.
That's fair. That's fair. I can give the answers unless you'd like to, but you could still guess.
Oh, I'll guess.
Okay. Oh, no. The Browning family and Todd Wagner are named after...
Rupert Murdoch.
Close.
I don't know on this one.
Todd Browning, who directed Dracula.
Dracula.
Yeah. So Rupert Murdoch, ancient vampire. Maybe?
I don't think we should say that.
Oops. It was a mistake. I'm dumb. Larry Murnau, who's the French teacher who goes on the plane, is a reference to the director of 1922's Nosferatu, Friedrich Wilhelm Murnau, which I did not know these things. I had to look these. This was something I found.
I noticed Hitchcock.
Yes, I also noticed Hitchcock. And Todd Browning, I felt like I should have because I did watch Dracula this year from 1942. 1942? Now I'm not sure, but it's okay. I'm just going to live with it. Valerie Luton, literally named after Val Luton, who directed Cat People in 1942. Agent Schreck was Max Schreck, an actor who was in Nosferatu. Terry Chaney was...
Lon Chaney.
Lon Chaney. That one's pretty easy. Agent Vina is the name for the director of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, 1920. And then Todd and George Wagner are directly named after producer George Wagner from The Wolfman.
Why did you start whispering?
Because I wasn't sure and I was confused. Anyway, as you were telling the story of Reddick and how he was such a fan of older horror movies, this was crammed in here in such a nice way that really deep Easter eggs that I missed a bunch of, but I thought that was really cool and helps place it in the canon.
Well, and it definitely shows an appreciation for the genre as well, which I think a lot of that's the thing about this movie. It didn't feel like a cash grab taking advantage of the respawned interest in horror following Scream. Like, it certainly played into that, as you would do as a business person.
And as the sequels certainly did.
But yeah, this was unique, and we know the writer had a strong appreciation from horror from a young age. But
right. And I think what's so neat about this and why it ranks higher for me, maybe why it's towards the top is because it captures and does a lot of the things well that horror does without the trope of a masked or hidden killer. I mean, we have it, but we also don't, right? It's the very environment itself, which kind of brings up we'll get to that more when we talk about themes, but Michael Myers is the unstoppable killing force. But so's death. Death could use Michael Myers to kill you if we're going to personify death. Anyway, the hero of our film, Devon Sawa, plays Alex Browning. I thought it was interesting. Reddick originally envisioned Tobey Maguire for this role. And I thought that was kind of interesting because, of course, Tobey Maguire was Spider-Man back in that era. So that would have been I could see him in this role as well. But Devon Sawa just brings such a presence and does such a good job with this role. Morgan was impressed by Sawa's performance in Idle Hands, which had come out recently. James Wong said, Devon is more of a regular kid who can take on the complexities of the role and become a hero. Now, Devon Sawa had been in movies since he was younger, Little Giants in 94, Casper in 95, that end part where he becomes human just for the night, and Christina Ricci, and they're so in love. Man, I was all about that when I was 14.
Oh, yeah, melting the young girls' hearts from an early age.
Yeah, I most definitely had posters of Devon Sawa on my wall, like many others of my age. Now and Then, 95, Idle Hands, 99, and The Guilty, 2000. The Guilty actually there was some filming issues, scheduling issues for him with that movie, but I think that he would put off filming for that one. A lot of the actors had to really struggle with other things they were filming at the time. Devon Sawa did take a career break of 5 or 6 years around age 25 after he'd been working for 15 years, which is crazy because he was kind of burned out. And also said, I thought was interesting, wasn't creatively fulfilled after Final Destination. He really loves this movie. I think a lot of the people that acted and worked on this movie speak very highly and very fondly of it. So, and he's certainly one. Then, he also had the part of Stan in that Eminem video because Dr. Dre saw him in Final Destination and liked it. So I remember when that came out in the early 2000s. I was in college at that point, and I was like, whoa, it was so cool. He did come back to acting around the age of 29, and then he's really experienced a resurgence in the last 5 years. I know we watched him in the Chucky TV series, which he played multiple roles in over different seasons. Loved him in that so much. Like just fell in love with him all over again. If I was allowed to put posters on my wall, I don't know. There might be one. Wait, we do have posters on the wall. They're just of monsters. Black Friday 2021 and Hard Eyes in 2025 is what the most recent thing I think we saw him in.
Yeah.
So he was great. Alex Browning, this kid is down to earth. I think he is such a sympathetic main character. He is not like a super popular kid, but he's got good friends. He's got the brothers who are his good friends. He doesn't have a girlfriend at first, but he and Clear obviously develop some kind of relationship. We'll talk more about that with the alternate ending. But he is so likable and he's so sure of himself, even in the face of everyone treating him like crap. Also, interesting for a movie, he has like 2 loving parents who are nice to him. I feel like a lot of times there's some sort of like family drama or tragedy because that makes the main character more interesting, right? But he's got 2 parents who are supportive and they pick him up. The other kids all have a little bit more in the background. But Alex is we open up with him showing perhaps a few signs, a few symptoms of OCD, perhaps not wanting his mom to take off the tag because he's feeling this sense, the tag off of his suitcase because he thinks that it will be good luck if it's on there. And then his mom rips it off and he's starting to see things. Alex basically, I don't think we get the impression that he's psychic before him. We get the impression that he's a little anxious and he's worried about this trip. And then he has the premonition on the plane and gets all of his friends off. And then everybody hates him for a while. I think what I noticed on this most recent watching was how well Alex handled all that for a 17-year-old kid. Like he is just sure of himself, sure enough to like go out to the places where people are getting killed, sure enough to break into a mortuary, sure enough.
Well, that was at Clear's suggestion.
It was. It doesn't mean he's not influenced by a pretty girl with those low-rise jeans and that little strip of belly there that was so ubiquitous in the 2000s. But he also did it. Like he didn't wuss out. He was just like, sure, I'll just go break into this building. Alex is a great character. He's smart. He's brave. He's compassionate. He tries, even though he does some stupid stuff, like going in to save Mrs. Luton, which is stupid. It's compassionate, but it's also dumb because they think that he's killing people. But there's that 17-year-old brain for you. All action, very little forethought.
Well, and there's that, but I also think, he's very aware that they're looking at him. And then I think that he places his values above his own safety and security in a sense. Like he thinks he's doing the right thing. He knows that they're looking at him and that his actions might place him more in their suspicions, but decides to try to do the right thing anyway.
Yeah, and that's interesting because in the opening, when he saves people from going up in the plane and blowing up, he doesn't know that he's saving them. He's really just trying to save himself, right? Like he's panicked. He's just had this vision of horrible carnage. And so he's emotional and he gets off the plane and then Carter starts fighting and they all just get hustled off the plane. He didn't mean to save anyone. He wasn't trying to convince anyone to get off the plane. They got kicked off the plane because of his response. But what really shows Alex's character is that after that happens, even though people are being total assholes to him, adults are blaming him for the death of their children. Like horrible things. The teacher tells him he's scary, even though he saved her life, which is fair, but like he's a kid. He just continues to try and save people's lives despite the potential consequences from our semi-bumbling FBI agents. He's an incredibly admirable person, and that continues all the way up until the end. Even at the end, where he is trying to leave Carter and Clear behind because he realizes that he's next on the list. He's like, no, you stay here. I'm going to go. He's going to try to save them all the time, and was willing to sacrifice himself to do it, for Clear especially. So that's, yeah, Alex is an all-time favorite character. Solid guy. Really bummed out that he dies off screen.
Between the first and second movies,
Yes, I do mean between the first and second, but I don't want to spoil anything because we promised spoilers for this one, but not the second one. Our leading lady, Clear Rivers, played by Ali Larter.
And it is Clear.
It is Clear.
Not Claire.
Not Claire.
So if you watch this to participate in this episode, if you were confused, it was Clear.
We were confused and thought it was Claire until the end of the last time we watched it, maybe.
And interestingly enough, and this happens sometimes, but well, first of all, I'm thinking, who names their kid Clear? And then you noticed last night in the credits that somebody who was working on the crew had that name.
Yes, and confirmed, I did look that up, that indeed the character is named for the assistant to directors Glenn Morgan and James Wong. So Clear was the name of their assistant, and usually you would get maybe a smaller character named after it, but no, Clear must have been a really good assistant. Reddick had envisioned Kirsten Dunst for this, which is funny. Maybe Kirsten Dunst and Tobey Maguire, who of course both starred in Spider-Man, different couple, also plenty of chemistry. Craig Perry had envisioned Jessica Biel, who I could also see in this role. But Ali Larter, who at this point was known especially for Varsity Blues, in 1999, the infamous whipped cream bikini scene. I'm sure you've never seen that.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Heard of it. Lie detector beep goes off. She was in House on Haunted Hill in 99 and also Legally Blonde in 2001. She's consistently been in TV and films ever since then. She was on the show Heroes in 2006. I really enjoyed that show. She also received a 7-figure salary from a film called Marigold in 2007. It was a Bollywood film that got really bad reviews, but she still got paid. So I thought that was pretty great for her. Also, just quick little tidbit for our New England connections, but she got married at her husband's family estate in Kennebunkport. Yeah, so there's another Maine connection. So Clear is a little bit of an artistic rebel. When we first see her, she's reading Tropic of Cancer by Henry Miller at the airport. And this is a book that was set in Paris in the 1930s. So it's set in Paris. It was also banned in the US for a long time for being obscene. It's about expatriates, artists, and prostitutes. And it is about the struggle.
Oh my.
I know. The struggle for artistic creation, the search for meaning, poverty, and sexual liberation. So this was obviously a very deliberate choice by either the directors or the production designer or the set dresser to have Clear reading this book at the airport, reading it while also translating or interpreting the French that's over the intercom when nobody else in the class that's all going to Paris knows what they're saying. And Clear, reading a book, nonchalantly gives off the interpretation. Clear is pretty much abandoned by her parents. She does talk later about how her father was killed. And so she is at least half an orphan, but then her mother ended up kind of just abandoning her. She lives in a house by herself and makes art from metal stuff in her garage. Also, she has my dog. She has a beautiful German Shepherd looking guy that I love German Shepherds and I've always wanted one. And so as soon as I saw him, I just wanted to give him a big hug. Clear is the only one who gets off the plane because of Alex's premonition, not because she's forced off or caught up or wants to check on him, but because she feels what he feels in that moment. That's a little bit of they have a weird, little bit of a supernatural connection that's hinted at a little bit in one. I think one place that this film sometimes does not do well with, or the franchise overall, is it kind of teases these structures, but then doesn't play them out all the way. Like, it's not very clear exactly what the connection is between them.
But I guess you could say that happens in real life a lot, though, too, that you can't find Well, I guess I haven't done the research, so I can't say that you can't find, but there's no, like, from my understanding, any acceptable studies on sort of psychic energy or empathic signals between people, even though there's a lot of people who believe they've felt it or have a strong power in that. And so in that sense, I guess the movie's fair in that it doesn't try to explore it further and just says that it is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is research about empaths and psychic stuff. And I think there's
But not
some
accepted necessarily.
maybe not accepted. I don't know how much is accepted, but I know there's definitely been research done on it. But you're right. It kind of keeps it vague. And one of the things she says at one point when she's talking to Alex, everything's in transition. And I want to come back to that later when we talk about the themes. But Clear is one of the only survivors at the end of the film as well. And she and Alex are sitting with Carter drinking wine and beer at age 18 in Paris together. So, and Clear also is the only one that shows up in the second movie. So Clear does show up in Final Destination 2 as well, which you just know from looking at it. So I don't feel like that's too much of a spoiler.
No.
The other survivor up until the very end almost makes it is Carter Horton, played by Kerr Smith. He was Kerr, I don't know, and I should have looked it up. He began his career with a role on As the World Turns in the mid-90s, but was best known for Dawson's Creek at this point, which he was on from 1998 to 2003. He was the first man to have an on-screen gay kiss on American television in season 3 of Dawson's Creek, which was a big deal back in the early aughts. We were around then, and that was a big deal. These days, not so much. But he's been consistently working in TV and film since then. He's got a long career since then. Smith called Carter, the character, your typical high school bully whose life depends on anger. And that's a great description of Carter.
Who's Smith?
Smith is the actor, Kerr Smith.
Oh.
Sorry.
I thought Kerr was his last name.
No, that's his first name. So the actor called the character, was speaking about the character and how he played him, and said that he was your typical high school bully. His life depends on anger. Carter is a jerk, which we see from the very beginning when he's picking on Sean William Scott's Billy. He has a hot girlfriend. They're making out all the time. They get kicked off the plane and are pissed about it, but then they're alive, and then he's still pissed about it. So he is really motivated by anger. He is obsessed with maintaining control over his life. He can't stand it that Alex might have control over his life. And so a lot of his motivations are having to do with wanting to reclaim control over his life. And he doesn't believe that death is chasing them until, of course, he gets stuck on the train tracks. But Carter kind of has a development. He has a real arc over the course of this movie, which we don't often have time for arcs in horror movies. A lot of times our characters die off before we have a chance to find out more about them or see them actually change. And Carter, whether we're talking about the original ending or the theatrical ending, has an arc in both of those. So that's Carter. Next up, we've got Valerie Luton, played by Kristen Cloak. And the reason I said aha is because Kristen Cloak is the producer Morgan's wife. And so she also was in Black Christmas 2006, which I didn't realize was also Wong and Morgan. And so she plays Lee Colvin in Black Christmas, who's Claire's half-sister, who's not in the original Black Christmas. But that kind of made me want to rewatch it because I was like, oh, right, we've only watched that once. But so her last movie was in 2017. Her last TV appearance was 2018. So it seems like she does not have a lot under her belt in terms of acting, but she did a great job in this role. I think she described her character as strong and sassy and in control. After the crash, she comes unglued, probably more than any of the kids. And it's a quick, drastic change. I had to understand the psychology of a person who can turn on a dime like that. She is sassy and strong. At the airport, one of her students is harassed or solicited by a Hare Krishna guy right after the airport said no soliciting. Val Luton kind of tells him off and flips him the bird and tells him to back off. She's very protective of her students, but completely crumbles in the face of the tragedy and has immense feelings of guilt after survivor's guilt. Oh, that Hare Krishna encounter, though, interesting. Hare Krishna believe that death isn't an end, but a transition. They believe in reincarnation. So interesting, especially because Clear later on talks about death as a transition, or everything's always in transition. And so, this Hare Krishna guy comes up and kind of tries to, just thought that was a cool little.
That's why I drink reincarnation instant breakfast.
Not a sponsor yet, but
We'll do some commercials.
hit us up. We've got our 2 FBI agents, Agent Vina and Agent Shrek. This was a few
He
years.
said like Wien.
It is. I'm saying it the German way. It probably is Wien. Agent Wien. It's played by Daniel Roebuck. He was mostly well known for being in The Fugitive. He was in Agent Cody Banks. He also did a lot of TV work. Matlock, Nash Bridges, Lost.
He's like one of those character actors you see in something and you're like, what else have I seen him in? And then you look it up, you're like, oh, I've seen 800 things with him.
Yeah, he was in almost all of Rob Zombie's films. Also worked a lot with Don Coscarelli. So he was in Bubba Hotep and John Dies at the End. He was in Terrifier 3.
Yeah.
Plays one of the Santa Clauses. Interesting note about this actor, he is a Christian and founded a nonprofit with his wife in 2020 that produces Christian films, which I thought was kind of interesting given how many Rob Zombie films he's been in. Agent Shrek is played by Roger Guenveur-Smith, who has a longtime collaboration with Spike Lee.
Oh.
Which I did not know. It's funny, his name is a reference to the actor who played Count Orlok, but he actually kind of looks like Max Schreck if you see a picture of Max Schreck and Roger Smith next to each other. So I thought that was kind of neat.
When I went to the theater and saw this in October with our older daughter, she laughed when they said Agent Shrek, which I think a lot of people think that it is a reference to our big green ogre friend Shrek, but it actually is not.
No, it is not. And this came out about a year before Shrek the movie came out. So I'm sure they would not have used it if this movie came out later. But just so now you know. And the more you know. We've also got a few more people left. We've got Todd Wagner, who is Alex's best friend. Him and his brother George. His brother, of course, dies on the plane. He was a stage actor from Canada. He's been in a few movies, including Disturbing Behavior is really the only one that I think I've seen him in.
And wasn't Keir Smith in that too?
Oh, maybe. I don't think so. I didn't see it. I think it might be somebody else that you're thinking of.
Oh.
I'm not sure, but you can check. I didn't check. He was also in Saw 3D in 2010. Chad Dinella was. So Todd Wagner's a great character. He is, just such a good friend to Alex. He and Alex have that little moment at the memorial where they're talking because Todd's dad doesn't want him to talk. I actually think that Alex and Todd remind me a lot of you and your best friend for some reason. I don't know, always has. And they really care about each other. It's like a really great representation of positive male friendship in movies that don't usually go that deep, which is why when reviewers are saying it's shallow and stuff, I'm like, actually, no. Like, we've seen a lot of shallow movies. This was not shallow. We care about these characters, which is why it sucks when they die, even if it is awesome.
And even more importantly than any of what you just said,
yeah,
Todd Wagner appreciates good timing of a good poo.
That's true. That poop conversation. Boys pooping together?
He might be the only character in history that you see poop twice.
Oh gosh, that's right. You do.
I'm not sure. I'll have to look it up.
At
least in mainstream films.
We've gone from a toilet being on screen in Psycho being groundbreaking to Todd Wagner pooping twice in Final Destination.
That should have been what it was called. Todd Wagner poops twice.
Stop it. Yeah, Todd, great character. Unfortunately taken out pretty soon. We've got Billy Hitchcock, played by Sean William Scott.
He was the man of the hour back then.
He was. Stifler in American Pie in 99. Dude, Where's My Car in 2000. Road Trip in 2000.
Love Road Trip.
I haven't seen that in forever. That was a good movie, man. The Rundown, Dukes of Hazzard. And then we saw him recently in Wrath of Becky, which came out in 2023.
Yes.
Which he did an awesome job. And it's funny because we were watching this last night and I was saying to myself, like, when has he not played Stifler as a character? Because even Billy is just kind of Stifler toned down. Like, there's not, And I was trying to remember
And more lovable.
Yes, he's definitely more lovable than Stifler. Poor Billy. But I was trying to remember, and I had forgotten that we did see him in Wrath of Becky, where he plays like a tough, scary dude, kind of. And he has a new movie out that I just added to my watch list called Bad Man that came out in 25. It's an action comedy. It's not streaming anywhere yet, but
I watched a movie with him in it last year that we should watch at some point. I think it was categorized as horror. If not, it's like a strong thriller horror that was really good. I don't know if you see it on there, on your notes.
I don't see it on my notes. It was a strong action thriller. Yeah, he's not
action.
Or not action, but like
Just
a thriller.
Like a strong thriller.
Hold on, let me...
Horror adjacent.
Horror adjacent, our favorite kind. Wrath of Becky, Bloodline, was that it?
That might be it.
2018.
That might be it.
He has a newborn son. Yeah, maybe.
Doesn't sound like it.
Evan values family above all else, and anyone who gets between him, his wife, and newborn son learns the hard way.
That might be it, but
yeah.
Anyway, continue.
Interesting. Yeah, but I had forgotten that we saw him in that other movie, really liked it, but Sean William Scott in this, lovable, keeps getting beat up by Carter, always in the wrong place at the wrong time, and gets taken out pretty brutally along the way.
And he's a pretty good in most of those movies, even though he's playing an utter goofball, sometimes a complete idiot. I feel like he's a good representation of the era. Agreed.
I think so. Sean William Scott said about the character that he's lacking some social skills. He's kind of the tag-along, doesn't have quite a few friends.
Yeah, he's like Stifler without the unbridled self-confidence.
Yes, exactly. And so he is kind of a tag-along. He's one who deals with Alex's gift with curiosity, right? And comes and asks him, am I going to pass? What's going to happen? He is just kind of worried about self-preservation, a little creeped out, but not too much. Just wants to stay out of trouble, but keeps biking himself right into it. Really fun character. Also, I thought an interesting note that the character was originally written as fat, but the writers changed it for him. So I couldn't find anything more about that. It was from some transcription of some interview or something somewhere. But I thought that was an interesting feature, and also that would be something that they would write in. And of course it is, because a lot of those movies would use body type in that way, right? But not something we would see generally. I'm like, does that mean they would have cast it differently if that had been a big piece of it? It was interesting to think about that character if they had changed that and made that his identifying characteristic.
Yeah, in a lot of those movies, especially comedies back in the day, and I've heard this somewhere else, and I might get this wrong, but there was usually either kind of like the stud or the straight character, then there was the nerd, then there was the fat kid.
Yeah.
It was kind of like trios in a lot of comedies around that time.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And so it's interesting that was part of the original vision for this. But we got one more of the survivors. Amanda Detmer plays Terry Chaney, who is Carter's girlfriend. And of course, that infamous bus kill scene, which is just awesome. I realized I've seen her in one other thing that I know well, which is Drop Dead Gorgeous, 1999, which is a film I really, really like, had on VHS and watched a lot when I was in college.
We watched that on a plane.
We did watch that on a plane. I still really enjoy it. I thought it held up pretty well 25 years later. But that's a really fun mockumentary style movie if you've never seen it. But Amanda Detmer, she went to Tisch and was in a bunch of movies and has been consistently working until 2021 when she doesn't have any more credits, but nothing huge. I think she was in Saving Silverman and The Majestic in 2001.
Saving Silverman. That was another big one for me back then.
Yeah. So I feel like we probably saw her quite a bit, but I think that since then she's just TV and film. And then last but absolutely not least, of course, Tony Todd plays Bloodworth, who I don't think we know his name.
No.
But that is how he's credited.
The Mortician.
Yes, the Mortician. He, of course, is credited with some of the greatest quotes from this movie and others in the franchise. But in this one, in death, there are no accidents, no coincidences, no mishap, and no escapes. Morgan wanted Todd for the role because he felt his deep voice would give the film an eerie tone.
A gravitas.
Yes, a gravitas. And he has over 100 films on his filmography, including Platoon in 86. And Night of the Living Dead remake in 1990, Candyman in 92, The Crow 94, just boom, boom, boom. Movies I love. The Rock, Wishmaster, all of the Final Destination movies. He also was on and off Broadway. He was on a bunch of TV shows. And of course, his final film, Final Destination Bloodlines, where he knew he had fatal stomach cancer and told the producers, but he still did the movie. And his final monologue in Final Destination Bloodlines was written by him. And so it's really great to see him in this. He brings just that amazing energy to the screen, that creepy eeriness, doing some crazy shit in front of teenagers, pulling the thing out of Todd's neck while he's talking to them. I had forgotten about that was so graphic. Also not upset that these two teenagers have just climbed in the roof of his funeral home. Oh, no problem. You're here. No big deal.
The interesting thing about Tony Todd for me personally, and I don't have I love his performance in any movies he's done. Did you mention the Hatchet movies?
Oh, I didn't know. There was too many to mention. So yeah, please.
Certainly in the horror realm, he was big in those. I've only seen the first Hatchet. We need to watch those. But I don't feel like a particularly strong connection with him other than that I love his performances. I really like Candyman, obviously. But when we first went to Vegas and got a taste of sort of the con atmosphere, and we've only really experienced that at those jamborees in Vegas with the last drive-in. But kind of in my head, we've considered going to a couple others, and I'm sure we will in the future. For some reason, I just had in my head that one person I always wanted to meet was Tony Todd.
Yeah, I know. I'm really sad. He was great with fans. He always interacted with them consistently. I certainly followed him online before he passed, and he always was really engaged and seemed really loved and well respected within the horror community. So really nice to see him in this movie. But that's all I've got for characters and actors who play them. I think it's time for what might be the funnest part of today, which is Murder Mayhem.
Murder Mayhem, 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 mayhem.
That's good.
Thank you. It's actually not as long as some other sections. In some ways, this movie has the highest death count of any movie we've done so far.
I did watch the kill count on YouTube for this, and the numbers are insane.
But in terms of death scenes, or scenes in which we see specific characters getting killed, it certainly comes in lower than, say, Silent Night, Deadly Night.
That's true. That's true.
So it is interesting to do Murder Mayhem for this movie, as it is different in that we don't have, actual killer, where we're just dealing with death here. But really the first death sequence, masterfully done, is the chaotic premonition death sequence that Alex has about the airplane. And I wrote in my notes, everybody dies in that scene, including all of our protagonists that continue with us throughout the rest of the movie. And that scene is just absolute chaos. The whole scene kind of starts with, you see the baby on the plane who's crying, and they say, well, that's a good sign. Nothing's going to happen to this plane. God can't take this plane down.
Particularly fucked up God is what he says.
Yeah. And then you see the disabled gentleman who has physical, mental disability, which kind of seals the deal. Is it after that he says that?
No, he says it when he sees the baby, and then he sees the disabled guy, and he goes, a really fucked up God.
Yeah. Well, and then when Billy eventually gets on the plane, he gets on the plane late because I guess he was using the bathroom and the door got stuck. He says something like that later on. He has the biggest bag of Whoppers, not Burger King Whoppers, but the candy, the malted milk ball candy that I hated as a child. I didn't know that they came in such quantity. But the one part of that scene is they keep cutting to, his tipped over Whoppers rolling all over the floor of the airplane as the chaos goes on, and people get sucked out of the side when the side of the plane busts open, which something similar to that happened on an airplane in 2025, but I don't think anybody flew out the side, but they had to deal with kind of a similar wide open airplane wall,
I guess.
the fuselage.
Uh-huh.
And at one point there's blood splatters everywhere.
There is a video with Craig Perry, the producer, where he goes through every death in the Final Destination franchise. And I just watched the first part for this one. He specifically talks about that big blood splatter. And he says it's not linked to anything in particular. That the reason that they put it in there was because you get this lizard brain understanding that something terrible has just happened to somebody that generated that amount of blood. So, and I remembered you saying specifically last night, like, where did that come from? And the whole point was that was added in by the producers because they wanted to trigger this horrible sense. I've got a lot more about how they made that scene in special effects. I have some more info about that. But yeah, you're right. It is. And I also talked about the Whoppers because, again, they use that to show, like...
You see a boombox hit somebody in the head, which is a very, 2000, late 90s kind of
I wish
fate.
I had a boombox still.
And particularly Alex, our hero,
Yes.
our main protagonist, we see him get burned to a crisp at the conclusion of that scene before he wakes to realize it was just a dream or a premonition. So... everybody dies and nobody dies. Until shortly thereafter, after our survivors deboard the plane, either get kicked off, or in Billy's case, he never actually makes it on the plane with his Whoppers. So those are safe. Nobody worry. You Whopper fanatics out there, the Whoppers remain safe until at least they were digested by Sean William Scott. However, the plane really explodes a few minutes later after some bickering between our characters. And the count of that death, I saw anywhere from 280 to 287 souls on board.
Yeah. Crazy.
So that quickly makes it one of the highest death counts of any film that we've covered. Easily the highest of any film we've covered, and maybe any out there.
Yeah, potentially.
And there's actually, some time between this event and our next death, which is poor Ted Wagner.
Todd.
That's what I said. I wrote Ted, and I just said what I wrote. What an idiot. Idiot.
So you didn't, it's not what you said, it's what you wrote.
It's what I wrote and read. Reading and writing, not my strength.
Stay in school, kids.
Stay in school. The more you know. And what this movie does, and everybody who's seen this knows well that they do a great job building tension in these death scenes and just start to make you cringe at every little thing because you can sense that it's coming. And one thing that this movie does that I don't think happens in later films is it gives more of a sign to the audience that death is coming. And I referred to it in my notes both as the death wind, because there would be like a breeze that would come through both in the location of the person who was about to die, and also for Alex usually, or at least on some of the occasions, experienced the death wind shortly before the death occurred. And then there was what I also called the death shadow, which Todd notices in the mirror behind him preceding his death. But in this scene, it really plays on your senses of discomfort. Just all the little things. The water starts leaking from the toilet, so you've got a slip threat, which eventually comes into play. But you wonder if he's going to get electrocuted because he plugs in the radio, which is playing the John Denver song. And which we didn't mention that the first time they heard that was when they were taking their duo poop break at the airport. They noticed that there's the John Denver song Rocky Mountain High playing, which precedes obviously the plane explosion. But it's playing again on Todd's radio in the bathroom. He's got those long scissors up his nose, cutting his nose hairs.
Yep.
And before that, he's shaving and nicks himself, and you think he's going to slip. And that every action he's taking, you're just like, please leave this bathroom.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. You know, the shadow in that mirror is actually, this was another thing from that Craig Perry video, was that's a remnant of the studio thinking that they needed something visual to represent death.
Right.
So that was, I guess it was on purpose, but also they were going to do more of that. But I think just having it here in the couple places that it remained after all of the cuts and all the demo audiences, I think you're right. I mean, this is just such an incredible scene. The way it keeps cutting kind of to first person, where like he's looking up at the shower and then he's looking at the door, like you feel like you are there.
And it's interesting because this is really the first of these scenes we get in this entire franchise. I feel like even the first time I watched it, not knowing completely what these movies are about, it accomplishes its goal 100%. And you get this sense of like, this guy's going to die. And you feel that every little thing that he does is going to cause that death. But it does eventually come when he slips on the puddle on the floor and trips over and gets his neck caught around basically the clothesline.
Clothesline, yeah.
In the bathtub. You don't see that very often, but I have seen it before where there's like that rope. It's not even a rope. It's like a string.
It's a clothesline. I think it just depends on where you grew up in the houses, if they had it or not. But
and he ends up falling into the bathtub, and there's soap at the end of the bathtub, so he can't get any traction to regain his balance. And he's reaching desperately for the scissors, but they're just out of reach. And so that is the end of Todd.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Alex, who is at his own house, gets a premonition as he's reading his Penthouse magazine, probably for school purposes.
Totally. Yeah, educational, 100%.
And it gets, at least some of the pages of the magazine gets like chopped up in this fan, which we've seen like 8 million fans at this point, wondering what's going on with the fans. And they tear up his magazine that sends just a little corner of a page that says Todd on it, on his leg. So he knows that Todd is not much longer for the world. The next death comes to Terry, the counterpart to Carter, and the whole group has, it's the one thing about this movie, the whole group has a tendency of finding each other.
Yeah.
Over and over again. But I guess you could chalk that up. I've heard some people be like, how come they keep ending up in the same place? But if there is some sort of psychic connection at play, I think that could easily explain it. There's synchronicities involved, and this group of people are forever tied to one another because of their survival from that plane explosion. So they're all ending up outside this cafe. And at one point, Alex sees sort of the premonition. He sees the reflection of a bus that's not passing by in the window, and you kind of forget about it. He and Carter get bickering again, as they tend to do. Carter doesn't want to give Alex any credit, and in fact, kind of wants Alex to stay out of his life. But meanwhile, he's the one who approached Alex, high school kids. And Terry, Carter's girlfriend, basically tells them to break it up, get over it. Like, are we going to let this define our lives forever? I want to move on. And as she's saying this, she's walking away from them, takes a step backward into the road, and briskly gets struck by a bus, splattering blood all over her friends.
Yeah, one of the most iconic scenes that is called back to many, many times, both in this franchise and also responsible for always thinking someone's going to get hit by a bus. Yeah.
And even though I know it's coming 100 miles away now, yep. I still react to it.
Oh, yeah. It was really... Did you hear about the audiences in the first few previews for this death?
No.
So the audiences went absolutely crazy after that death. And so they actually had to add length to the shot. So right after that, you have Alex and Clear both doing Alka-Seltzer in a glass. And that scene was added just so the audience could calm down enough to hear the dialogue that happens next.
Oh, that makes sense.
So that was an addition to the scenes shot, because that death so disrupted the audience's calm. They could not pay attention for a minute afterwards.
That makes sense because it is so abrupt.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty wild I've heard there was a lot in researching this movie about how much they responded to the early audiences, which I think is a really cool thing. And I think that it makes this a better movie and gives it more longevity.
And Terry's death is really kind of almost an antithesis to the normal style of death in these films. While I think going back, you can feel it coming a bit more. It is not the same as Todd's scene or Miss Luton's scene, which we'll talk about next.
Or even
Billy.
Billy's. I mean, Billy's is a little more similar, but still there's like that Rube Goldberg kind of thing going on, right? And you don't have that with this. This one, the shock is the suddenness of it, not the inevitability as much. And it just looks so good. Like real good.
Yeah, and with the sound design and everything, it's very visceral.
Yeah, great word. Yes.
Our next death scene here in Murder Mayhem is poor Miss Luton, who is, the scene opens with her on the phone. She's bemoaning the situation of where she finds herself after this tragedy. She explains she's lived there her whole life, that she's the one who told Larry to get back on the plane, the survivor's guilt, like you mentioned. And, she's first fixing herself a pot of tea as she's packing up to move out of her house and leave town. And of course, she turns on the gas to turn on the burner. And she first pours the tea in her mug, and then she abruptly dumps the tea out because she realizes it's the Mount Abraham High School mug. And she tells herself, "You're being silly. It's just a mug." Switches from tea to the very cold vodka with ice from her freezer, which, if you ever have worked in a kitchen or maybe even experienced this at home, I remember I had a glass break on me at a restaurant where I was working once because it had just come out of the dishwasher and I put ice water in it and it shattered. And so her mug cracks. She's dripping vodka all over the place, leaving a trail through her house. It gets into her computer, which starts a short and a fire. The great thing about this, as we've said, you're sort of wondering in these scenes what's actually going to take her out, because each little step seems like it could be the end. And behind her for some of the shots is this stained glass window with a dagger pointing down straight at her, which is how she eventually meets her end, is with a knife. But that doesn't really happen until at least a few moments later when the fire breaks out. The computer explodes and like a shard of glass from the screen hits her artery. She's bleeding profusely. Then the fire spreads across the vodka and she's on the floor in the kitchen reaching for a towel, presumably to address her neck wound, and ends up pulling down the knife block and gets a knife straight to the heart, which Alex then manhandles and pulls out of her.
Teenagers.
And leaves his footprints in the blood, further, increasing the suspicions of his culpability in these moments. But he makes it out of the house just in time before the whole place blows up, and Billy witnesses him from Billy's bicycle.
Right. Yeah, this was the most difficult one for the crew to plan, I think, is what I saw. And it was definitely the most elaborate of, other than the plane crash, right? And even more elaborate. One thing, though, I did, and I picked this up from Kill Count, mentioned this and said, well, if that's only 100 proof liquor burns like that 80 proof liquor doesn't burn like that. And so I looked it up because I was like, I want to verify that. And yeah, because 80 proof is 60% water. But once you get to the 50% water, the 100 proof, then it burns. That usually if like 80 proof will just be like a blue flame, not nearly as dramatic as what they needed. So maybe she was drinking that 100 proof vodka.
Sure, she might have been. Why not?
Yeah, I know. True story. It's actually kind of hard to find 100 proof vodka because that's what I use for my herbal tinctures. And I have to search for it sometimes.
I bet. So, speaking of poor Billy on his bicycle.
Poor Billy on a bike.
We get to a bit later in the movie here. Alex sort of disappears, but they find him. And by they, I mean you have in Carter's muscle car. Carter's driving. Billy's in the passenger seat, and Clear and Alex are now in the back. And, there's the conversation about fate. And Carter's decided, what does it matter then? If I'm going to die, I want to be in control. I want to be the one who's in charge of my end. And he starts driving erratically, going full speed through red lights across town, scaring scaring the bejesus out of his passengers, particularly Billy. And there's that wonderful scene where Carter stops his car on the train tracks.
So good.
And this whole time you're certain that Carter's next, and it's kind of implied that he's sort of next on the list after Alex has done his big investigation and figured out the path of death and how it went through the seats and sort of determined the order of how everybody is supposed to die. And everybody's finally able to get out of the car. Billy, Clear, and Alex move clear of the car, and Carter's sort of sitting there, and then he finally decides, you know what? It's not my time. Meanwhile, the train's coming, and he goes to start the car, doesn't start, tries to get out, his seatbelt's stuck, but Alex has had a premonition that the seatbelt will rip and is able to pull Carter out of the car just in time. So death skips Carter at that point, and we see that from the accident, the train does still hit Carter's car, which is probably more painful to him than his own death might be.
Probably.
But there's some shard of metal sort of resting under the train tracks that gets caught up in the wheels of the train, and I wouldn't even say decapitates Billy.
It half decapitates him.
Yeah, it cuts off most of his head, but not from the neck.
Which I wrote in my notes, really goes the extra mile. Like, you could do just an easy decapitation, but they cut right through his face. Did you see the premonition for Billy's death earlier in the movie?
For him getting his head cut off?
Uh-huh.
No, I don't think so.
I didn't either. It was pointed out to me that early on when he's looking at the plane as it's taking off from the airport, it flies across his face at an angle, the reflection of like the plane, like, so we see the reflection of the plane while Billy's looking out, and it goes across his face in the same angle that it gets cut off in. So
incredible.
Yeah, I think that was another cool little tidbit that I learned.
Would have been nice if he'd found that out before we watched the movie last night.
I know, we could have looked at that, but I didn't. I found it out today as I was prepping.
So that was poor Billy's death. And of course, next on the list is, we think it's Alex. And then Alex realizes, because he did or didn't switch seats in real life, that Claire's actually next. He was holed up in Claire's father's cabin in the woods. Fantastic scene.
Really great.
Of him death-proofing this cabin, trying to avoid all things. We went back. Did you ever find out what he's eating?
I didn't. It looks like cat food, though.
But it's something that he doesn't have, that it would be impossible for him to choke on. Does not look very delicious. But he realizes that he's not next. It's actually Clear. So he goes on a race through a storm, escapes from the FBI by canoe, which is amazing.
That scene is wild. I also wrote that in my notes. Alex escaping by canoe is wild. Like, he just jumps in it, and they're all like, oh, well, we can't chase him.
They catch up to him pretty much as soon as he gets back on foot. He's running through the woods. You think it's certainly the end for him when a lightning knocks a tree over on top of him, and he's basically pinned down with his face underwater in a puddle, but he escapes that. And, meanwhile, Clear is dealing with her own issues with the storm, and a power line comes down outside her house, which causes a whole bunch of chaos. She tries to escape after the electronics and the electric sockets are like exploding in her house. She gets in the car, and what else happens to her?
It's all kind of chaotic, but she tries to get out, and then the garage door opener falls into her windshield. So then she's stuck in the car, and it's about to catch on fire, but there's electricity, so she can't get out. And then Alex shows up.
He shows up and basically takes one for the team, tells her not to touch anything, but then a fire starts again and engulfs the car. He knows that the car's not going to be safe for her for long. Meanwhile, the live wire on her car is basically keeping her trapped in there, and he takes the move to remove that wire, allowing her to get out of the car. He gets electrocuted.
Mm-hmm.
And you think at least one of these characters is going to die in this scene. And in the theatrical cut, the only cut, really, of this movie, neither of them does. They both survive. He saves Clear, and he survives his injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And we cut to 6 months later, where our remaining survivors, Carter, Clear, and Alex, are deboarding a plane in Paris to, complete the circle of their intended trip at the beginning. The final scene, they're sitting outside a cafe drinking some beers. Like you'd mentioned earlier, Alex realizes he's actually next still, that nobody intervened in his death, that was the thing with all the others that it had skipped, is that someone had intervened and thus cheated death, and there was no intervention in his death. He should have died, but he just survived. So he's trying to get away from his friends. He's about to meet the same fate as Terry did earlier with the bus.
Yep.
Clear screams his name, and the bus swerves out of the way to avoid him, which starts a whole nother Rube Goldberg scenario, which causes the sign. Is it a hotel sign?
I think so. I don't know.
Some giant sign basically comes loose and is swinging down toward him. And you think that that's going to be the end for our protagonist, but Carter saves him and basically tackles Alex to the ground before he can die. But to close out the movie, Carter stands up, and that sign, as it swings back the other direction, takes him out as it cuts to credits.
And the sign is 180, by the way. It's another 180.
Which we didn't mention, the original title of this film was supposed to be Flight 180.
Right, and so we see that throughout the film, which is kind of linked to some of the themes of inevitability, right? And kind of like the repetition. The only other thing about that death, there's a stunt guy, there's a street sign that gets knocked down by this bus, and it hit a stunt guy in the head, and he ended up with half his face was kind of falling off.
Oops.
47 stitches. He came back to set later that day and asked to see the shot. So the shot is actually in the movie of him jumping out of the way, in which he gets horribly injured. So talk about mayhem. So that was a really cool little tidbit as well. So yeah, I guess we can talk about some of the themes which we've touched on here, and they're pretty obvious. They're not really hidden in this one. One quotation from Reddick that I liked: "It wasn't just some slasher movie. The whole idea is that there's a pattern to death added another level that set the franchise apart." Perry says, "We don't have a visible bad guy. The bad guy in some ways is a metaphysical idea, a thesis. Is it fate? Is it destiny? Is it death itself? By not providing a concrete answer, you can bring your own background to the viewing experience. It's really a reflection of what you believe." And I think that kind of encompasses most of the themes that we see here, especially awareness of mortality is one of those things. And I think that so death is a relentless adversary and not just the end of the story, but death as an actual adversary. And we live in a society that is notoriously afraid of its own mortality. We do not see death very often in the global West. And so people are afraid of it. And so horror movies, one of the ways that we explore that. All of the characters react differently to escaping death and Alex's prediction, right? Some of them are gracious and are thankful to him. Some of them are angry. Some of them are afraid. There's curiosity. There's the pastor who is doing Todd's funeral, quotes from Ecclesiastes 9:12, "For no one can anticipate one's time. Like fish taken in a cruel net or like birds caught in a snare, so mortals are snared at a time of calamity when it suddenly falls upon them." So kind of the inevitability of death and the awareness that everyone is headed towards death. And Todd, in his speech at the memorial before his own death, talking about how you never know if this might be your last afternoon. And along with a couple of competing views on it, where Clear says everything's always in transition, and then the Hare Krishna with kind of reincarnation, and then Alex saying to Clear when he's about to grab that electrical line, he says, "I will always be with you." So there's also this recognition that death is not necessarily the end, that there may be something further. And I think there's more of that in other places. And this is kind of intertwined with a discussion of determinism versus free will. So whether or not we can escape fate. I would say that these films overall argue that no, you cannot, that death's design will always win. So the pattern for this in following films is: one, there's a premonition. The character sees a victim and sees the victims of a disaster and saves some of them. 2, there's interference. Survivors are removed from death's design. And then 3, there's death's correction. Death orchestrates elaborate accidents to eliminate them in the original order. So this is kind of the the way that death as an antagonist works in these films.
I feel like this movie would make a great pairing with Donnie Darko.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, the inevitability of fate and death. The films argue that death is inescapable, and yet our protagonists, both in this film and further films in the franchise, refuse to believe that or accept it, right? They don't give up in the fate of it. They continue to fight. And I think that that's one of the things that's fascinating for us as viewers. What would you do? What do you do in the face of something that seems inevitable? Do you fight or do you roll over? And so it's not, these movies aren't about how you should live your life. It's about how terrifying that realization is. And that when you try to change it, it only makes the inevitable more elaborate, more horrifying, that you can't defy, which is terrifying, right? That is a terrifying world to exist in where nothing we do can make a difference.
Maybe that's what the critics disliked about this movie, is that it provides no answers. But the reality is that there are no answers.
Well, that's exactly it. I spoke with someone recently who was talking about the experience of being incarcerated and said, and it was someone who had ended up there through no fault of their own, whatever it was, but they weren't planning on it. It wasn't expected. It's not like they were on the run. It's just they ended up in jail. And they said the biggest lesson that they had learned was that this life that they had planned for themselves, all these plans that they had, it all meant nothing, that it could be taken away in an instant. And this person was talking about how that they had turned to God in that moment because it was like, oh, I'm not in control of my life. God is. But this is the question that religions answer or try to answer in different ways. And this is the question that the film is answering. The film is answering it. The film is saying there's no hope. You can't beat it. But we keep going back to it because there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to beat it. And so I think that kind of the theatrical ending that we've seen, which is really different than the alternate ending, that death is inevitable, and that's super depressing. Kind of like Michael Myers is inevitable. He's the mountain. He's unstoppable. There's nothing that will stop him, not even death. And here that is death and the inevitability of your own fate. I did find one cool theory on Reddit that I'll just kind of quickly sketch out, where the author asks whether is death a supernatural entity, right? Like that figure that you can almost see a couple times in this movie, or is it just that the characters in this movie live in a world where a natural law governs life and death. That law being, if lives are saved through a premonition, those lives will be lost in a certain order. That is the law, like gravity, like physics. It supervenes physics. It never contradicts physics, but it's a natural law, like the law of chemistry, biology, or psychology. That this is a natural law. So what's worse? Is it a universe of pain and suffering where you have like a sentient God that is trying to make you suffer? Or is it a universe that heartlessly follows natural law with no further explanation? I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. I think people say this movie is about death personified, but I think it's not so much death personified as a natural law that is simply playing to its ultimate end is way scarier existentially. So that is the hopeful themes, presidents. But in the alternate ending, the movie chose a different path, right?
Yes, and we should touch on that real quick before we head into vibe check.
Yes. So in the expanded, and this is on the DVD or the Blu-ray if you get it, there's expanded scenes. Claire and Alex sleep together. Claire finds out she's pregnant. Alex is killed after Claire exits the car and is burned to death, which is
real bad. Very similar to his vision in the beginning.
Exactly, that he is burned to death horribly and dies. And then we flip forward to 6 months later or some months later, and Claire is having his baby. His parents are there comforting her. She has his baby and she's in the nursery with him, and the wind comes in and turns the mobile around, and Alex's final words to her, "I'll always be with you," are then made true. And then she runs into Carter at the memorial, and a leaf comes down and falls down. So what's interesting is that there's a lot of talk about this alternate ending because they haven't tried to hide it. What the producers said about why they changed it was that the audience didn't like the original ending and in fact tore the seats up out of the theater and threw them at the screen when they saw this original ending.
Sounds untrue.
Sounds hyperbolic, but that's what he said. That people were really pissed off at this original ending.
I did say after we watched these alternate scenes and ending last night, I'm glad that they cut it all.
It will completely change the message of the movie and of the franchise, which is that death is inevitable and you can't beat it. Although they would then break that rule later on, pretty like the next movie. But
aside from that, it also drastically changes the tone. Like the movie goes out on the tone that it comes in on,
which is shock and inevitability and despair. Yeah.
As opposed to this very melodramatic sort of outro that was kind of long.
Yeah.
And doesn't, like you said, it ends on a leaf falling down.
Yeah. It's a little different tonally, I guess, from the opening. No, that's true. I think I prefer the ending that it has. I think it's interesting that it really fundamentally changes how this movie ends. And then the franchise's direction, that death is inevitable and there's no fighting it. But yeah, favorite character for you?
I guess Alex.
Me too. He's so great, man. There's no one better. He's really an all right final guy, even if he isn't the final guy. I don't know. Kind of like our friend at the end of Black Christmas, who we have decided does not survive, although that's not canon. But favorite quote? Did you pick one?
You had said the Tony Todd thing, which was one of them. Hold on. We are all just a mouse that a cat has by the tail.
Yeah, that was good. My favorite line needs a little bit of an intro. It's when Clear is showing her artwork to Alex. And you liked this line a lot too, so I was going to let you pick it if you wanted. But Clear says, "Do you know what this is?" Alex says, This is Springy Head Guy." Clear says, "It's you, Alex, and how you make me feel." And Alex says, "I'm sorry." Like immediately deadpan. That little dialogue set with them, there's like another little bit in there too. Really, really tight. It was good. So yeah, that is it. I mean, that's it for a lot of story, but I'm not sure there was too much extra in there. It's all interesting. All interesting.
All right. Well, let's take this into our vibe check.
All right.
Back in the vibe check. Everybody knows that it's time for that.
Yeah.
All right. We're I know I always say this. We're running quite long.
We are, but I have to insist. I think that it is good stuff. So, but like let's go.
We're doing Tony Todd's work. Or
yes.
something. So in the vibe check section, we cover a lot of the aspects of the filmmaking that affect the tone and atmosphere of the film. And as always, I'm going to start with cinematography. The cinematographer of this film was Robert McLaughlin, Canadian cinematographer who was a successful cyclist in his youth. And he quit the sport to take up cinematography, entering the field after studying at Simon Fraser University in British Columbia, Canada. He notes his inspirations being his father's photography and his appreciation for the films Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Walkabout. I'm not familiar with Walkabout, and outside of his film inspiration, he was also influenced by chiaroscuro, which is an art term for the use of strong contrast between light and dark. In art, usually bold contrasts affecting a whole composition. He was also inspired by Dutch art and pre-Raphaelite movements of art, specifically the works of Andrew Wyeth and Georges de la Tour. And after graduating college, he was mentored by Richard Lederman, a Canadian cinematographer of documentaries and feature films. And most notably for our purposes, this Richard Lederman was the cinematographer for Stephen King's It in 1990.
Cool.
But back to Robert McLaughlin. His professional career began with documentary work for Greenpeace, before he became involved in both TV and feature films, and his work has earned him several industry awards and additional nominations. He found recognition as the chief cinematographer for the TV series Millennium, which we mentioned earlier, and which is how I think all of these filmmakers' paths crossed paths. He was pulled on to shoot for Chris Carter's other series, X-Files, in its third season. But when he was working on Millennium, he developed a distinctive style for the series, shooting it with desaturated colors and lighting scenes as though they were to be filmed in black and white. He also made use of high-intensity strobe lighting, usually used for advertising and macro cinematography. His first film was in 1986, called Abducted, and then he worked on Final Destination, The One, and Willard with Wong and Morgan, and he shot Cursed for Wes Craven, which I've not seen Cursed. I believe that was Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson again. He did Final Destination 3 and then Black Christmas again with Morgan and Wong, among other films. He worked more extensively in television. I'm not going to go through his full list, but notably he did some stuff on MacGyver, which is cool. And more recently he worked on Ray Donovan, Westworld, Lovecraft Country, and he did a couple of episodes here and there for 1923 and Yellowstone.
Oh, those shows look good.
He also filmed a bunch of TV movies, but for the movie at hand, Final Destination, he shot it on 35mm film, and the visual style combines dark tones with rich colors, creating a tense atmosphere. And there's definitely a lot of dark tones in this film. And the film uses dramatic lighting to create suspense and highlight key moments, particularly during the death scenes. Various camera angles are used to build tension and often focus on the characters' reactions to impending doom. And we got to give some credit here to the film's editing by James Koblenz as well, who employed quick cuts during intense scenes to heighten the sense of urgency. The other thing that I noticed watching it last night, which I had never really clocked before, was that in almost all of the death scenes, there were two scenes going on at the same time that they were cutting between. So, and usually it was between whoever was dying and whatever Alex was doing.
Right.
So obviously the Todd scene, Alex is in his room getting the premonition, and not the same for Terry's scene, but for Miss Luton, that's the time when Alex has been picked up by the police from Miss Luton's house by the FBI agents, and he's sort of being interrogated while Miss Luton is setting up herself for disaster.
Right.
But they did that really for every death scene moving forward in the movie. And it really does create, a kinetic energy that really adds to the tension and the momentum of the film. So that's pretty much all I had on cinematography for this movie. But I think that you've got some good stuff on the special effects.
So just to add a little bit about ambiance, because I think it goes with cinematography, but it had a lot to do with the production designer, John Willett, who I know we've talked a lot about that. And I read one quote from him: "What I've tried to do with the sets themselves, with their design and with various color choices, is to make things just a little unnatural. Nothing that calls attention to itself, but instead creates a sense of uneasiness, the unsettling feeling that something's not quite right." And I was thinking about your commentary about that scene where Luton is pulling down the towel on top of the knives, and how you were like, it feels wrong. Like, I don't know what's wrong with it, but it just doesn't feel quite right. And that was purposeful by the production design and by the film's producers. The sets were skewed, so they were refracting and reflecting in strange ways. So they looked really almost natural, but kind of unnatural.
Well, and it wasn't the knife block that I was referring to. It was
Right.
the teapot. When she's wiping it with the rag, there's something strange about it.
That's right. And so I immediately thought of that. And so the sets were purposefully skewed to refract and reflect the character's state of mind, which then creates a sense of unease, which I thought they did really well. So just that little added piece, that was on purpose. That's why you felt weird. They did a good job. Also, just the 90s, early 2000s vibe of this movie, I just wanted to call out. It feels so good. There's the posters in Alex's room of the Eddie Furlong movie Pecker and Goo Goo Dolls poster. the fact that 17-year-olds are just gallivanting around. You still kind of have that 80s freedom. Like teenagers today, I don't think quite have the same freedom. Also, could you grill a 17-year-old without his parents? Like, I guess, like when the FBI is interviewing Alex, I was wondering about that, but it just kind of adds to that. It's very timely. Those were the only things I had about kind of the ambiance and the vibes. Special effects. Okay, so there's a ton. There's elaborate practical effects. There was miniature sets and there was CGI. The plane crash scene, what they did for this, I can't believe the budget was only $23 million. It's kind of crazy. It was a full-scale mock-up of a 747 on a massive hydraulic gimbal inside a very large soundstage. It took 2 months to build the central set piece. It weighed 45,000 pounds and held 89 people. And so the plane could be shifted on the gimbal to create a pitching movement of 45 degrees side to side and 60 degrees front to back. And that's when those whoppers, like they were using the whoppers to show how much it was shifting. But it actually was shifting that much. So a bunch of extras got motion sickness from filming that scene because they were going back and forth so much. People, like those were people's real looks of shock and awe from there. It was a week of shooting for the crash sequences. They ripped walls apart. Stunt people were flying out of the plane on harnesses. And then for the explosion scene, they made a mini model of a Boeing 747. It was 10 feet long and 7 feet wide, had landing gear that was made from machined metals. And the miniature had to be launched 40 feet in the air. The visual effects supervisor, Ariel Velasco-Shaw, was talking about this. And then they used 3 cameras running 120 frames per second and 1 camera running 300 frames per second. And if they'd filmed using real-time camera, the success wouldn't have been filmed in a particular order. So they used camera tricks, they used practicals, they used models, they used everything at their disposal to make this, which is a lot for a horror film that they're not sure if it's going to make it. So, I mean, I'm grateful that they had all of that. Another big scene that took a lot to create was when Carter's car was hit by the train. So they stripped the car down to the metal shell. To keep the actor safe, they had to make sure there was no real sheet metal in the car because that, of course, is what kills Billy's character. But they had to make sure no one actually died. So they had to strip the car down because normally a train would push a car along and off to the side. It wouldn't smash it like that. So they had to make it more dramatic. So they stripped the car down to the metal shell. They split it in 2, and then one half rolls off in fire and the other goes into smoke. So it turned out really well for them. But again, there was a lot that went on besides just putting a car on a train track. And then for the death scenes, there is a lot of realistic looking stuff. That part where Bloodworth pulls that needle out, right? But just pretty typical practical effects. They used life casts of all the actors. They used chocolate syrup for the fake blood. You know, oldie but goodie. Yeah, a masterpiece. I mean, this movie came out 25 years ago and it looks great.
I saw that thing about the chocolate syrup. I have some doubts about that, but...
Really?
Yeah, I feel like they were doing different stuff by then. And maybe they used it in certain circumstances, but the reason they were able to get away with chocolate syrup in the past was for black and white shoots. But then we talked about the cinematographer who often shot things as if they were going to be in black and white, so who knows? But,
who knows indeed. But
and it's interesting when you talk about the car, I don't even register it when we're watching it that obviously they had something hit by a train. Like that wasn't CGI, but I didn't think about the fact that they had to set that up.
Right. You'd think that they'd just put a car there, but that wouldn't work. So, yeah, if we ever do spin the rest of the movies in this franchise, I think there's plenty of other cool stuff about the special effects get even more cool and more elaborate as these films go on. So I think it's neat to see where it all started.
Absolutely.
Do you have a few things on music and sound design?
I have things on music.
Cool.
Not necessarily sound design.
I think we've talked about sound design here and there, but the use of it to kind of heighten the tension and all that. But yeah, expertly done.
So usually when we're talking about music for movies like this, like horror movies, particularly from this era, there's sort of 2 aspects to it. There's the soundtrack and the score. The soundtrack being sort of the songs that you hear and the score being more of the orchestral stuff. In terms of this soundtrack, there was no official album that accompanied the motion picture like some movies had. Like I have the soundtrack from Scream, the original Scream and Scream 2, which has all of the bumpin' tunes from the mid to late 90s on it. that were in the film, but there were only really 5 songs that were featured in this movie. The most prominent, obviously, being Rocky Mountain High by John Denver, which we talked about before. I tried to do Rocky Mountain High count, but kind of lost sight of that as we went on. But I think it's on there at least 5 times. And other songs featured include 100 Grand by Pete Atherton, which is sort of the acoustic number that's happening during the memorial scene. You have Into the Void by 9 Inch Nails, which is blasting from Carter's car while Alex and Clear are sitting outside the cafe shortly before Terry's death. And that you do notice that in that song he actually says Final Destination. Mr. Trent Reznor says. Mr. Trent Reznor says is the alternate version of Simon Says. And there's a song All the Candles in the World by Jane Siberry. And that's during Carter's car scene, I think, when they're all driving together, as well as And When I Die, performed by Joe 90 during the end credits. So I think that's part of the reason they didn't release an album is because there weren't enough songs to release a full soundtrack accompaniment concurrently with this movie. In terms of the score, they did release an album. Final Destination, the complete original motion picture score, was released the same day the movie came out. The score was conducted by composer Shirley Walker, born in Napa, California in the 40s. She passed away in 2006. She was one of the few female film score composers working in Hollywood during her career. She wrote her film scores entirely by hand and always orchestrated and conducted her own scores herself. She won 2 Daytime Emmys for her work on Batman the Animated Series and subsequently Batman Beyond. The ASCAP Shirley Walker Award was created in her honor in 2014. Her first film score was for 1979's The Black Scallion. If you've never seen it, it's about this onion that, really...
It's wild and it needs to be tamed.
It's a tale that needs to be told. She also did 1979's similarly titled The Black Stallion, which I think is about a horse.
Something like that. That's a weird thing to make a movie about.
Horses and onions. She co-composed a lot of movies. I don't know if that has to do with the fact that she was a woman in the industry. They didn't trust her to, do it herself. Or maybe that's how she preferred to work. I'm not sure, and I didn't get enough into it to figure that out. But it would seem like old-timey thing that she would be a co-composer on a lot of things. But interestingly enough, she co-composed some films with Richard Band.
Oh, cool.
Including the score for The Dungeon Master and Ghoulies. She did additional score work for movies with Hans Zimmer and Danny Elfman.
Wow.
Along the way, she co-composed the score for True Lies with Brad Fiedel, which I can't remember what movie he scored before, but he definitely scored one of the movies we've talked about. And she co-composed with John Carpenter and Alan Howarth on Escape from L.A. She then did Final Destination, Final Destination 2, Willard, Final Destination 3, and then Black Christmas. All of those with Morgan and Wong, Black Christmas being her last film before she passed away.
Wow.
She was, like a lot of the crew that we've talked about in this movie, she had maybe an even more extensive career in television, working on Falcon Crest, Knots Landing, The Flash, a bunch of animated Batman stuff, Space and Above and Beyond. But then, of course, for Final Destination, her score was primarily low-key, but it really enhanced the suspenseful and emotional moments were sort of the focus points. Walker described it as very theme-driven, with a mix of eerie sounds and stirring melodies. The music was performed by a union orchestra, again, which she conducted. The score received positive reviews for its effectiveness in creating atmosphere, and it is recognized as a significant element contributing to the film's suspenseful tone.
Yeah. I think I wrote strings coming in hot at the very beginning.
Yeah.
So All that plus strings coming in hot.
Strings coming in hot for the Black Scallion.
Yeah. So speaking of music, it's time, I think, right?
Should we play some?
Let's play some music. Time for the open mic.
And our gimmick for this was in the past. Is that what it was called?
In the past. That's what it functionally was. I don't remember what we called it.
So I'm interested to see how you dealt with that parameter. And
yeah, that was like the only parameter. No explanation given. So yeah. All right, let's get set up.
All right.
Okay, I feel pretty good about this one. I don't know how well I know it, though. So we're just going to give it a try, like we do here at the open mic. This is called Inevitable. Inevitable, you live, you lose. Inevitable, you try to choose. Inevitable, the past comes through, and death always gets its due. Relentless obsession. Why won't you let that shit go? The past as possession. How do we know what we know? There's nothing and there's no one to blame. It's just how these things go. So how do you know it's inevitable? You live, you lose. Inevitable, you try to choose. Inevitable, the past comes through, and death always gets its due. The future already written into the passing days. The truth is alarming, but it's already all happened this way. There's nothing, there's no one can change what we've all already done. So don't you know it's inevitable? You live, you lose. Inevitable, you try to choose. Inevitable, the past comes through, and death always gets its due. Inevitable, you live, you lose. Inevitable, you try to choose. Inevitable, the past comes through, and death always gets its due.
Very nice.
I got really excited about how well I was playing, and then I got to the repeat of the last chorus, and I was gonna do some like cool funky voice stuff, and I messed it up. But I want you to leave it in because that's part of this process, and
All right, I could have cut it.
I know, but I think that that's important. That happens sometimes, that we make mistakes, and I'm okay with that.
Super cool.
I mean, I hope that we get to do another version sometime. But we haven't heard your song yet, so I don't know if this is the one that we'll demo. But I am pretty proud of it. So
Very nice. All right.
Your turn?
I guess so.
All right, let's do it.
All right. So I wrote basically a whole song inspired by Final Destination that was pretty literal, and I really couldn't get it to groove. And so sort of at the last minute, I've put together a different song entirely, and I hope I make it through from beginning to end.
Hey, you have a very low bar to reach.
But I definitely like this one better. I didn't know what to call it. I've called it Chewed Me Up, inspired by Final Destination.
I was indestructible, and I never thought it through. Because I didn't have to. Life was so much different then, before it came so clear that every moment was fleeting, the end was ever near. Well, one day it spun me like all around, without a sound. It chewed me up and spit me out. The only thing I figured out is I might make it. It wasn't life without a fight, but I made it through another night. If I had a chance, I realized I better take it. I thought I'm gonna have to. The world was so much better when there were no expectations, when no one ever looked to me in their times of desperation. Because they didn't need to. And they didn't see to. Well, one day it spun me like all around, without a sound. It chewed me up and spit me out. The only thing I figured out is I might make it. It wasn't life without a fight, but I made it through another night. If I had a chance, I realized I better take it. I thought I'm gonna have to. No one ever told me I had to be the one to hold me. When I went to rest my head by day's end, but I would often lie awake, wondering what could ever be at stake, losing sleep over things I couldn't mend. One day it spun me like all around, without a sound. It chewed me up, it spit me out. The only thing I figured out is I might make it. It wasn't life without a fight. I made it through another night. If I had a chance, I realized I better take it. I thought I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna have to. Life was so much simpler when I couldn't see the truth. I was indestructible, and I never thought it through. Because I didn't have to.
What's wrong?
You made me cry.
It wasn't that good.
I just think it hit in a certain way. That was really good.
Well, thank you, love.
I don't remember the last time one of your songs made me cry. Yeah, no, I think you nailed it, man. And I think that's the best kind of song is when it's written about something so specific, right? But that also can hit on a bunch of different levels. And that's some of the beauty of music and movies, and it's why we do this. So
Yeah, and I looked at the Alex's situation as really sort of that life moment where you sort of go from child to adult.
and that whether it's you can foresee your death and the death of a bunch of your friends, or it's just whatever life throws at you, I think everybody, that's a universal experience, even though the specifics are so different. So no, you nailed that one, babe.
Thank you, love.
All right, let's get back to our setup, and I'm gonna calm myself down.
Alrighty. Talk to you in a sec.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, we're losing light.
Can you believe it?
I still can't believe I said Black Scallion.
I am so glad that you did.
But, so that was Final Destination.
That was pretty fun.
Should we find out before we move any further what our next movie is going to be?
Yes, we should. 100% we should.
All right, let me open up the wheel here. The Wheel of Horror, as we call it.
Mwahaha.
It's been a while. Let me update you on what movies we could potentially spin.
Yeah.
30 Days of Night, Psycho, Nightmare on Elm Street, Candyman, Carrie, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Shining, Alien, Slumber Party Massacre, The Strangers, Child's Play, Intruder, and Sleepaway Camp.
Man, these all sound great.
Yeah, we've got a lot of great movies to talk about, that's for sure. And of course, also we have the sequel spot, which if I land on that, it means I spin another wheel with so many wheels that has sequels for a lot of the movies that we've seen.
Right. So does that mean that Final Destination 2 is now on the sequel?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
All right, let me see. I am now about to spin the wheel.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Spinning. The wheel's spinning.
Here it goes.
You couldn't even hear it. It's disappointing.
That is
Dun, dun, dun.
melodramatic. Thank you, John.
This will be fun to tackle.
What is it?
We're taking a trip back in time
Oh boy.
to watch Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho.
Yes.
What a classic. I am excited.
This is going to be great and really different from our 2000 movie,
Yeah.
Final Destination.
And in terms of the gimmick, let me spin the gimmick wheel.
Let's
I've turned
do
up
it.
the volume a little bit now, so maybe you can hear something.
Okie dokie.
Spinning.
There it is.
The wheel is a spinning.
I mean, I can hear it.
The audience might not, but that's okay. And we've done one of these before and we had a lot of fun with it. It's Prop Song.
Ooh, prop song. That's a good one.
That's where we have to basically focus on one inanimate object from the film upon which to base our song. Of course, Rachel's song Arrow lives in infamy from Friday the 13th, and I'm sure you will not let us down for Psycho.
Nope, I'll figure it out.
But anyway, this has been so fun. Please check us out on your socials, anywhere you do your internet socialization,
We're everywhere.
at OMNLD Pod.
That's us. And if you got a chance, send it along to someone who might enjoy it as well, who would like these really, really deep dives along with some funky, cool tunes.
Yeah, word of mouth is one of the very best ways to spread the word about our podcast, and certainly send us some comments, videos on the videos. Send us comments on the episode. Wherever you're listening, we greatly appreciate it, and we look forward to doing this again. We will be doing Cycle.
Can we? I was going to say, I'm not sure we can make it through a closing.
I know. This is our. We just hate to say goodbye.
We do hate to say goodbye. It's so difficult.
It's like you hang up. No, you hang up.
Talk about a 90s vibe. Okay. Really, we're leaving now. We'll see you next week.
Well, Cycle will be in 2 weeks.
Cycle will be in 2 weeks. But yeah, we'll still be here next week doing our Final Destination Encore.
Absolutely.
With a produced version of one of our 2 songs.
Yes.
So, yeah.
TBD.
We'll see you then.
Adios.
All right. See ya.